On March 18, 2011, protesters gathered in the southern city of Dara, Syria. Angered by the arrest and torture of teenagers who had spray-painted anti-government slogans on a wall in the city the month before, demonstrators voiced demands for greater freedoms and political participation. The protests did not initially demand the resignation of President Bashar al-Assad. Instead, they focused on the lack of basic freedoms in the country. Syrian security forces detained protesters at first, then attacked them with batons. They later opened gunfire and eventually deployed tanks. Bashar al-Assad refused to halt the violence and implement meaningful reforms demanded by protesters. Assad continued to deny responsibility for the attacks on protesters, placing the blame for the violence on armed groups and foreign conspirators instead. One of the main opposition groups, the Syrian National Council, was formed by activists in Istanbul. The SNC called for the Syrian government to be overthrown by a united opposition. Opposition forces called the Free Syrian Army, mainly composed of defected soldiers and civilian volunteers, became increasingly armed and organized as they unified into larger groups. The Syrian government characterizes this insurgency as an uprising of armed terrorist groups and foreign mercenaries. The conflict has no clear fronts, with clashes taking place in many towns and cities across the country. The International Committee of the Red Cross assessed the Syrian conflict as a civil war, thus applying the international humanitarian law under the Geneva Conventions to Syria. According to various sources, about 40,000 to 50,000 people have been killed, half of them being civilians. To escape the violence, hundreds of thousands of Syrian refugees have fled to neighboring countries. In addition, tens of thousands of protesters have been imprisoned, and there have been reports of widespread torture and psychological terror in state prisons. The civil war has spilled into neighboring countries such as Lebanon and has brought death to these places as well. In July 2012, the Syrian government stated that they would never use chemical weapons against their domestic opposition forces in this war. The United States have described the use of such weapons as a red line for the Assad regime that would result in enormous consequences.
The use of chemical weapons is and would be totally unacceptable. And if you make the tragic mistake of using these weapons, there will be consequences and you will be held accountable.
Assad and his regime insisted it wouldn't use such weapons against its own people, and it does not admit actually having them. The Free Syrian Army and the rebels fighting against Assad's regime have been clashing in the capital of Damascus for quite some time now. The Assad dynasty, which has ruled Syria for over 40 years, may now face insurmountable odds. Assad has minimal people still behind him, and his power is crumbling. Many of Syria's allies have stated that they recognize his regime is starting to fail. Whether you're on the side of Assad and his government, or the side of the rebels fighting to overthrow him, we need to put the politics aside. Keep these people in your mind when you take something in your life for granted. Many of these Syrian people live day to day just trying to survive. Thank you.
Rami Dunham. My father is from Syria. He grew up there. I still have family that lives there now.
What do you want people to know about the Syrian conflict?
I just want people to know the severity of it and that it's still going on every single day, even if you're not directly affected by it like I am. I hear about it from my dad every day, so I really know like how bad it is, but people don't realize that they can help, and the best way you can help is to get information about it, you know? Just get informed, see what you can do.
All right, what do you want to tell American kids and kids our age?
I want to tell them to basically don't be ignorant about it, you know? I feel like the Middle East gets a bad rap, and they're going through a real tough time, and you have young kids out there dying every day. That's people's family members. You got to think if that's your little brother, your little sister. So just think about it the best way you can and see what you can do to help. Something that you got to realize is there's kids our age and even younger that don't have the opportunity to go to school every day. I have a little cousin, he's 11 years old, and they shut his school down because it's getting bombed on his bus on the way to school, so it's not safe anymore. So really just be grateful for what you have, that you can go to this nice school, that you have the opportunity to get a good education in a safe environment when not everyone gets that. So just you need to get some more information on it and see what you can do to help.